I strive never to forget the real-world consequences of my decisions on individuals, businesses, and government.
Joining me now is Rachel Maddow, host of MSNBC's Rachel Maddow, right here on MSNBC. Rachel, good to see you. Thanks so much for joining us.
Sure, Norah, nice to see you too.
As we have heard a lot of positive reaction from Democrats, but we've heard some negative reaction today from, shockingly, Rush Limbaugh, who is already calling Sotomayor and President Obama reverse racists. Let's listen to what Limbaugh said.
Here you have a racist. You might want to soften that, and you might want to say a reverse racist. And the libs, of course, say the minorities cannot be racists because they don't have the power to implement their racism. Well, those days are gone because reverse racists certainly do have the power to implement their power. Obama is the greatest living example of a reverse racist, and now he's appointed one.
And of course, Rachel, I think what Rush Limbaugh is referring to is something that the judge said back in 2001, where she said this, quote, "I would hope that a wise Latina woman with the richness of her experience would more often than not reach a better conclusion than a white male who hasn't lived that life." Is that going to be a controversial statement that she's going to have to defend?
I think that she's going to have to defend everything that Republicans choose to attack her on. That's the nature of the adversarial process at this point. But it's rich to have, Rush Limbaugh, he of Barack the Magic Negro fame, attacking people for being racists at this point. I mean, certainly the attack on Sotomayor, to the extent that it is based on her race, to the extent that it is attacked, that the attacks on her are based on the idea that she is an affirmative action choice, I think that's probably the weakest ammunition they're going to have against her. I mean, you don't get to be summa cum laude at Princeton on the basis of some sort of favoritism. You don't get to be Phi Beta Kappa on the basis of somebody trying to do you a favor or try to redress some past wrong. So if they want to lead with attacking her on the basis of race and affirmative action, I think it means that she's going to have a pretty easy confirmation process.
That's an interesting point that you make. What about the other point, which is on her saying, when she said where policy is made? That's what Mitt Romney is attacking for her today. He put out a statement essentially saying the nomination of Judge Sotomayor to the Supreme Court is troubling. Her public statements make it clear she has an expansive view of the role of judiciary. Historically, the court is where judges interpret the Constitution and apply the law. It should never be the place where policy is made, as Judge Sotomayor has said. She was joking about that sort of at the time, but nevertheless, it will be one of the controversial parts, I believe, of her confirmation hearing. But I think we see more here as Mitt Romney, because Huckabee, too, was quick to put out a statement. These guys positioning themselves to be the main opposition to President Obama, don't you think?
Sure. And I think that everybody, especially who right now currently isn't holding office and is looking for a place to have a platform in the Republican Party, is going to try to make some hay with Sotomayor's nomination. I mean, the idea that assertion from her about policy being made at the appellate court level is going to be some sort of magic bullet against her is just, I think, wrong. I think what she was saying there is, at the appellate level, you make decisions that become the law of the land for the entire circuit that you're speaking for. When you're at the district level, you're one court level down below that. If people have an issue about your interpretation of the law, they appeal it. So it's essentially a statement of fact, and they can try to twist it into something else. But again, it's pretty weak ammunition, I think, against her at this point, if this is all they got.
Rachel, I'll point out we're watching Air Force One at Andrews Air Force Base because, of course, the president is about to head out west to two states where there is a heavy Hispanic population, of course, Nevada and California. That's Marine One just landing there, and the president will see him get out shortly. But on that very point, Rachel, about the Hispanic vote, I mean, whether some of these Republicans will feel I don't know, perhaps will be concerned about blocking the first Hispanic justice to the Supreme Court, given how their party has done in the past 3 elections. I mean, George W. Bush in 2000 got 35% of the Hispanic vote. John McCain got less than that, 31%. I mean, Barack Obama trounced him more than 2-to-1 when it came to Hispanics. The Republican Party is in a terrible state when it comes to courting Hispanics. Do you think some of these Republicans will look at those, they know those numbers, and think maybe this is is not a good idea to wage some war against a woman that's going to be the first Hispanic Supreme Court justice.
I think it's going to be one of the most interesting things to watch here in terms of telling us about the future of the Republican Party and internal Republican dynamics. You saw some of the same calculations, I think, on the issue of how hard Republican politicians wanted to run on the issue of illegal immigration, with conservative groups in the base essentially demanding that they run hard against illegal immigration, either demonizing immigrants or essentially trying to make policy on that issue in response to this as if it was some great new crisis. A lot of Republican politicians in the mainstream resisted that because of, in part, the electoral need to keep Hispanics at least somewhat inside the Republican fold. I think you may see a similar divide on the Sotomayor nomination, with Republicans who want to have a future in the party, who are concerned about the next election cycle, not wanting to be seen to be opposing the first ever Hispanic nominee to the Supreme Court. And you may see the base and the interest groups and those on the fringes willing to push much harder against her.
Rachel, I was struck, of course, not only by the president's comments today, but also those of Judge Sotomayor. Her life story is very compelling. She also talked about her mother, who held 2 jobs to try and make sure her children had the best education possible. Just want to play a clip of Sotomayor talking about her mother today. Listen.
I stand on the shoulders of countless people, yet there is one extraordinary person who is my life aspiration. That person is my mother, Sonia Sotomayor. I have often said that I am all I am because of her, and I am only half the woman she is.
You know, it's interesting. She was so compelling, and it made me think about what we reported and Chuck reported first here on NBC, that when the president met with her, that he was blown away by her and her life story, of course, which, of course, he had read about. But clearly, she presents it in a very interesting way. And the president talked about is how her mother found the only encyclopedia and bought it for her daughters. I mean, this is part of, I think, her story, don't you think? That the president, as he is the first African-American president and talked about her, is trying to make this case that we may see throughout his presidency that anything is possible in this country, don't you think?
I think so. I think it's obviously an American dream story, this idea that, as she closed her remarks today, talking about being an ordinary human who's been given extraordinary opportunities, implicitly extraordinary opportunities only possible in this country. Her father not speaking English, having only an elementary school education, her parents moving to mainland United States from Puerto Rico during World War II, the incredible hardship they went through after her father died. I mean, it is an American dream story, but yet, when you look at her professional career, she is actually quite mainstream. There had been all of this speculation that Obama would pick somebody who was a governor, who had been an elected official, somebody who was sort of outside the halls of the judiciary. But instead, he picked somebody who has been not only a trial court judge, but an appellate court judge, and a prosecutor before that, and a corporate lawyer before that, bringing more years on the bench to this point in her nomination than any nominee in recent history. So to have found somebody with that incredible American dream life story, but also somebody who's very much came up through the ranks of the judiciary, is sort of I mean, you're sort of getting best of both worlds there in terms of what you might be looking for in a hypothetical nominee.
All right, Rachel Maddow, host of The Rachel Maddow Show right here on MSNBC. Rachel, thanks so much for joining us. Look forward to your program tonight.